Elizabeth Wadsworth with Velera, welcome to see you on the show. I'm delighted to have you today. Is that actually you, or are you AI?
Yeah, it's tough to tell anymore right now, Doug.
Well, with the
Uh,
technology out there now, yeah, we could both be artificial humans, but we are real on this show. And Elizabeth, tell me about how you got started working with the credit union movement. What kind of work are you doing today at Velera?
sure. So my journey started in 2013 when I was in a really tough season in my life. My dad was actually battling cancer, and my husband and I both lost our jobs within a month of each other.
Oh.
His was due to a government shutdown, which is very familiar these days, and mine was due to moving across the country to be able to take care of my dad. And we had a baby and a toddler at the time. So you can imagine it was a really tough period. And out of instinct, I applied for a position at a credit union in California where we had just moved to. And because I felt it was aligned with my nonprofit background, that was the industry that I came from. But what I didn't expect was that, working in a credit union and seeing how a credit union operates, it completely changed my life, actually. So they helped me rebuild my financial footing. And I got to experience the mission of credit unions directly. And I saw
Mhm.
it every day in our membership. And so I think for me, not only as working for Valera, something that I love to do, it's deeply personal for me because my credit union changed my life. I would have nothing that I have today without my credit union, and that's really why I'm here.
That's an awesome start. And that's why I asked that question with all my guests, because there often is an emotional connection to the credit union movement. It's a lot more than just the place you got a loan. It's the place that kind of did the right thing consistently again and again and again, and enabled many people to get to the next step. So that's fantastic. Very good. So now what are you doing at Valera?
Yeah, so as you probably know, we're the nation's largest QSO, and we provide payments and digital technologies for credit unions. I work on the innovation team, and my specific focus is on AI and innovation. So, what are we doing currently? What can we be doing in the future to help our credit unions serve their membership? So that's my specific focus is, how do we take stock of what's going on? Sometimes I feel like it's an impossible position to be in these days
Hmm.
with the change
Hmm.
of pace. It is more rapid than anything we've ever witnessed in our lifetimes. So, needless to say, with my servitude that I have for credit unions, I take it very seriously and responsibly. It's something that I care very much about. And so, what I offer, from an innovation perspective and Valera, is something that I feel comfortable offering to credit unions, that I feel that credit unions could actually successfully adopt. So that's kind of what I'm focused on is not only, where's this technology going, but what's a good fit for credit unions?
Yeah, well, and it's new, it's fast. The board, has got to decide to lean into it and where. We got lots to talk about, but kind of the focus that we sort of set up for today was about agents. And can for our listeners that might not understand the difference between, can you go ahead and break that out for how you would describe agents and what's being developed in that area?
Yes. So agents are the next evolution of AI that is moving from questions to completing tasks. So think about agents as an action. And so you can imagine that, when we think about it from this perspective, the impact on a credit union and specifically member services, there are many opportunities, but there are also many ways that that can go sideways if you're not doing it responsibly. So one of the things that I like to talk about, alongside agents is governing agents because it's a very different type of technology that actually needs to be managed. And I think that's the biggest differentiator. Whereas, say, for example, a co-pilot, you would get an answer and it's generative, whereas an agent, you need to actually direct to do something.
Mm. So, what is your perception, or what have you seen as far as what do you think the first action that an agent is going to take in a credit union? I know in our work up for the podcast, I said, hey, have you got any credit unions that can join us for this podcast that are doing it? And well, not quite yet, right? It's that
Right.
new. It's that new where it should be something you're paying attention to and building some strategy around, but it's not in place yet. So where do you think it's going to start?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, it's something that is individual for every credit union. And I think it's important to point that out because every credit union is in a different position with their maturity and their ability to adopt agents. And so it really just depends on where they have the data and where they have the ability to understand an entire process to be able to take advantage of something like agents. So, for example, some of the, I would say, most common use cases that I see are going to be back office. So
Mhm.
they're going to be taking things that you do that are either repeatable tasks and trying to either automate or supplement those with an agentic process. Those are where we see, safety and ability combined and good use cases. From a member facing perspective, the ability to be able to do some of those types of agentic processes really is going to be dependent upon how much you can take on from a security and safety perspective.
Mhm.
And that's what the big differentiator is because when you're using agents, say in a back office situation and say something doesn't go exactly right and you learn a lesson about it, it's for the credit union to learn. But when you do that in a member facing capacity, you're going to erode your trust with your membership. So there is a substantial difference in risk involved in where an agent is best used. And so that's just, again, an individual per credit union decision based on what's available.
Yeah, it seems like the on this podcast and a few episodes ago, we did an interview with a company that was taking all the processes and procedures in a credit union and pulling them together into an AI that the staff could ask for the right way to do things. And that seemed like very logical and reasonably low risk to have a single source of knowledge around internal processes and procedures is something that I would think would be a pretty good place to start. Are you seeing that? That's not necessarily an agent, right? That's just
Right.
an AI database to tell your people how to do things. But if it went
Yes.
to be an agent, how would that look? Or how do you think that would look? Because it doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, yeah. So that's really going to be breaking a process down into small chunks and where it would make sense. And sometimes the answer is it doesn't make sense. And it's important to point that out to say, you don't have to necessarily jump right into an agent. Maybe RPA is a better option. So that's robotic process
I'm
automation.
like,
And
what's
we've had that.
that?
Yeah, we've had that technology for a while now. And actually, Valera offers that as a service. But basically what you do is you take a process that is repeatable. So say it's doing the same thing over and over. That's a great use case for an RPA. Whereas when you get into agents, it's taking an action on behalf of, say, for example, a person in a credit union. So instead of the person going and doing that action, it's an agent going and doing that action. So it's really dependent upon the process that you would be identifying as something that would be valuable, for a credit union. And something that I think is important to point out is that it needs to be tied to your credit union strategy. So if you're looking to, say, for example, speed something up and you're looking for those efficiencies, you're going to want to look at a process that could use efficiencies. And that's where, those good use cases come from. You wouldn't want to say, well, we heard that this was a good place to use agents, so we're going to do it over here, and it doesn't have value for your credit union. That's kind of a disconnect. So it's really going to be, what are we trying to accomplish at this credit union, and how can this technology help us do that?
Yeah, and is it possible to do that?
That's
Whatever that is,
that
right?
is
Is
exactly
it
right.
is
That's exactly right.
And then is the data in the right place to make that possible is a whole nother issue that I haven't really dug into yet because frankly I think it's above my
Yes.
technology understanding.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that is really a hot topic. And, specifically when you're talking about member facing solutions, again, that risk, is very, very important to evaluate and your data sources. That kind of gets into something that I care very much about and that we're championing at Valera, which is responsible AI. And how do you adopt responsible AI? What does that look like? And that's actually looking at your data sources to understand if there's bias in your data. You may not even know that there's bias in your data, but say, for example, you are looking for loan approvals and you have a subset of members that have had been approved for a loan, but say, for example, they all have a certain demographic or there's a certain characteristic, and that agent or machine learning on the back end is looking at that for its training data. It's going to automatically eliminate a subset that's not there. It's going to throw it out. And that's what is really important about, understanding your data sources and ensuring that that bias is not in that data when you're looking at solutions like this, because that can go horribly wrong. And we've seen that happen, very publicly. Workday, is a great example. They had bias in their hiring data and they didn't know it, and they thought, oh, well, we're using a third party, that was their responsibility. And, unfortunately, from a regulatory and compliance standpoint, they were stuck with it. They had to actually own it. And that's something that is also very different about this type of technology, is where the liability sits. Very important to understand that.
Mm. So going further down that path, then let's talk about governance. Like, how do
Yeah.
you think about governance? How do you build a governance system for AI?
Yes, and that's a great question. And it's not something that I think we talk enough about, in the credit union space. And it's something that I care very much about. Really, it boils down to transparency and trust. And that's what it does. So when we think about responsible AI, it's not necessarily a virtue. And I say that because it sounds nice, and it sounds nice to say, yeah, we practice responsible AI, but what is it actually? And it's actually a process. So it breaks down transparency, how you're using AI and disclosing that to either your employees or your members, making them aware that it's happening. Accountability. So when you're deciding upon a solution, knowing who's accountable for what piece of that solution is very, very important. Fairness and equity, we were just talking about that, understanding, is this fair, to all of our membership, and is this representative in our data of our entire membership, and understanding that. Data privacy and data stewardship. What type of data are we using? There is something that is called data minimization, which is using the minimum amount of data possible in order to help with something like an agent or some kind of Gen AI solution. Just enough data to be able to get what you need, but not exposing, all of your
Mhm.
credit union data. Another facet of that is explainability. So, are you able to explain the solution in a sentence? That's the kind of guideline that I give is, can you explain how this technology works in one sentence? And if you can, then you're probably on the right track. If it
Mm.
takes you, 5 minutes to explain it, maybe you have to work on your understanding, or the way that you describe, how it works. Security and safety, that is another piece that I think that tends to get overlooked until it's too late in the process. Something that responsible AI and AI governance gets into is actually front loading those conversations so that you're talking about it before you get down the road with a solution, and you're thinking about all of these things up front before you spend time and money and energy on something that may not be necessarily the best fit. And then you get into your human-centered design. So, is someone in your credit union able to actually use the solution that you're building? Very, very important, because, adoption of these technologies is going to be dependent upon the staff at the credit union. Are they even able to use it, and do they understand how it works?
Hmm. Yeah, it seems like the area for credit unions to focus on is really that the internal steps first to kind of
Right.
get the confidence of the staff that it works, and it has less risk clearly because the member doesn't necessarily see it.
Right.
So how do you think about agents? Do you think about them as like as part of your technology system, or you think about them as digital employees? How do you how do you put that together in the organizational structure?
Yes, that's absolutely a great way to think about it is like a digital employee because something that I like to say and I think it's a good thing to remember is that it's math and not magic. And so if you think about all of these technologies, they are all mathematical under the hood. And so if you think about that, and say you're onboarding a digital employee, say for example AI, you're going to need to direct it in some way because it's not going to know. So mass is not going to know where mass needs to go. That's the credit union and your responsibility is saying, okay, we understand exactly where we're going to use this and here's what we need it to do. Explaining how it works is very, very important, and having a deep understanding of where you're directing it and why it matters. And if you think about it like that, like an asset, like you would an employee, where would you put a new employee? Where does it make sense? How is that going to be moving the needle?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're looking for those really good use cases.
Yeah, I like that metaphor a lot. You start out and you just work your way up the same way as you would as a beginning employee in the credit union, and you don't let them have the full access to everything and the ability to make a huge impact on the member, good or bad, right from the beginning. You work your way up. Uh,
Right.
I know there's been some regulatory progress, I think primarily, right, in this
Yep.
space. Can you talk to me about the what's going on in the regulatory area for agentic development?
Yes. So there's really not a lot of guidance right now on what needs to take place, and I think that speaks to, the perspective of where this administration thinks about governing AI, because they don't want to stifle innovation, which makes a whole lot of sense. And so they're leaving the responsibility of some of the, I would say, detailed regulatory decisions to the states. And that is something that I think is really important to understand going into this moment in
Mm.
time with agents is because each state may have its own regulation. And that is also, if you're a multi state credit union,
Yeah.
you need to understand the jurisdiction based on where your members are using your solution. So if you are, based in California and your members are in Nevada, you need to understand that the California regulations apply to you. And so that again gets back to AI governance and why it's really important to understand just all of the places that these agents would touch, or even any solution would touch, to be able to understand, what you need to do in response from a regulatory and compliance standpoint. Now, one reason that I love to bring up responsible AI is because I think that if credit unions were to think about responsible AI as kind of a roadmap, it's going to most likely cover any kind of regulatory requirement that's coming down the pike. Maybe you would get a little bit more detailed about, some of I'd say differences between states, and maybe they have a little bit different of a rule. But if you just put down those pillars and start to focus on, being able to explain it, understanding your data privacy, what have you done from a security standpoint? Are you being transparent with your members? If you just followed those guidelines, that's going to get you really far. And so when those regulations start coming down the pike, you'll be able to respond and not react. And I think that's really important to start to put into place now before you expand your footprints with AI.
Yeah, set the guardrails up
That's right.
and align it with your overall strategy and figure out
Right.
where to start. Maybe that way. A lot of credit. There's a lot of smaller credit unions, a lot of medium-sized credit unions. I got to think for most credit unions, this has got to be something you're going to partner with, or partner with a fintech, partner with a big company like yours. Like, how do you guys think about how that's going to what guidance credit unions are going to have, how that's going to be developed. It seems like a big lift.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. And that's, what our perspective, at least my perspective at Velera, is that we should be looking to fintechs to partner because none of us are technology shops. Credit unions aren't, Velera is sort of, but not with some of the advanced technologies. That is a specialized skill set that you're going to most likely have to add or adopt from outside. So really understanding, at the root, again, what is required from a due diligence standpoint is very important. What I've been focusing on from the innovation team's perspective is what is actually required from a diligence standpoint to be able to document down that, say, for example, a third party solution that also uses AI. That's one of those gotchas that I think, even the NCUA got picked up on, which is giving that guidance to credit unions that it's not only your direct vendor, but if that vendor is also taking advantage of AI, understanding the regulatory needs underneath that, solution provider. So it's
Mhm.
one level deeper than we're used to going from a vendor due diligence standpoint. So what I am looking at, and what I focus on, at least on the innovation team, is how can I do that work for credit unions so that they understand that, say, for example, if Velera recommends a fintech or a partner, that we have done our homework, that we're recommending a solid solution that we know
Mhm.
is going to be a good fit for credit unions. And so
Mhm.
that's kind of where, I've spent my time focusing recently.
Yeah, it's very noisy and confusing, and I get credit unions aren't technologists, so that makes a lot of
That's right.
sense. So at least the options you're looking at have been pre-cleared to some degree. What about how can this be an advantage? Right? Credit unions are smaller than the big banks. The big banks have whole armies of technologists that can build these things custom for them. How can credit unions take this moment to try to position themselves to get ahead a little bit?
Yes. So if credit unions are able to build and instill that trust with governance at the core and responsible AI at the core, that is a way to really be able to get ahead because sometimes, big banks are like a large ship. They're not going to be able to turn the
Mhm.
ship very quickly. Whereas credit unions, as we know, is like a speedboat. We can turn the ship really quickly. So if we can learn how to safely utilize some of these technologies and say, for example, a pilot situation that's done correctly with a full understanding of strategy and governance, and it's a really solid solution, that is a way for credit unions to actually lead in this moment,
Mhm.
specifically with responsible AI. I think that responsible AI is in the ethos of the credit union movement because we care deeply about our membership and we care about that, building that trust with our membership, and we don't want to break that. And I think we can demonstrate that we lead in this moment to say, maybe some of these, other competing, either neobanks or big banks, may not necessarily take that to heart where they're just doing whatever they need to do to make more money. Whereas credit unions, we just operate differently. These are our communities that are in our membership base. And so we want to protect them. So we say, hey, we take that seriously. We are the leaders in responsible AI. I think that is a very big differentiator and a way that, the movement can pull ahead.
Yeah, especially if you combine that with, and we know you, and we know
That's
you,
right.
our member. We know you. You've been with us. We have your data, not in a intrusive way, but in a way that so we can serve you, right? I'm not sure
That's
how you
exactly
actually execute that. I think that's very hard, but that's the outcome I hope the credit union movement can execute.
Absolutely. I agree. I think that is a great opportunity, especially as we talk about things like open banking and open finance and, having the ability to do that now, I think it's a great time to, start to take advantage of some of those technologies to serve our membership, to be able to help them in ways that, maybe in the past we haven't been able to do.
So what things besides well, in addition to your area, Valera, should our listeners pay attention to? Because you guys are up to a lot of things. What should they
Yeah.
be plugging into, and where should they be paying attention?
Yes. So I would say, again, governance and responsible AI, having an understanding of that is a bedrock and a foundational for building any solid AI practice. Also understanding your strategy. So that is very key to successful adoption and implementation of AI is where are you directing it? Where's it going? And remember, it's math and not magic. So be realistic and don't have magical thinking. I mean, art of the possible is always amazing, but be grounded and realistic in, your approach to be able to say, okay, this is something that's actually valuable. But also understand, it could take an amount of time. So don't chase headlines and hype. That is another, be aware that there are things happening, but chasing the headlines and that FOMO is really going to throw you off track. So understand what really moves the needle for your credit union, what data you have, what people you have, and then also, make sure that you're educating your entire staff at this moment in time. I think AI literacy is a way that credit unions, again, could differentiate. We have the ability to be able to help all of our staff learn how this technology works. And you can do that safely with your co-pilots, right? Like teach them prompting, teach them the value of how to use this technology in this moment in time. That is something, and if you do that for your entire credit union, that's really powerful. That's not something, that I see other large organizations really focusing unless it's sometimes mandated, which you don't want to do that, but really make them part of it, make it fun. Get creative with it and get them involved, because that's actually really where you're going to find most of your use cases is through your employees that understand your problems.
Yeah, and don't forget, for gosh sakes, the board, right? The
Oh,
board
yes.
needs to be
Yes.
AI literate. I know one of our recent interviews, we were talking about a certification. The board could be certified in AI, and boy, that
Yes.
makes a lot of sense. Is that's going to be a key part of your strategy? You need to make
That's
sure
right.
that the folks that are developing the strategy are armed to think about the technology in a strategic way from an
That's
informed standpoint, right?
Yes, exactly. And that's really, again, where it goes back to that governance and really understanding what AI governance is. I think something that I have seen is that there's an assumption that it's a GRC function or a data governance function, and it's not. It's much more holistic than that. It is really getting into, some of the risks and harms of your membership and getting into your employees and how, the staff at the credit unions are impacted by this. And again, pulling together that strategy, that goes beyond risk and compliance. So that is a board function, and their understanding of exactly why they're using AI.
Mhm.
Again, if you can state that in one sentence, exactly what you're doing and where it matters, you're on the right track.
Wow. Excellent, Elizabeth. I love the start. I love your story of a credit union gratitude for helping you get here. I love that you're helping credit unions to pursue this must-win initiative of AI and agents actually taking action on your behalf to give the 24/7 service experience to deliver more to the membership and be able to protect the credit union against, fintechs and others coming into our space. So with that said, any final thoughts for our listeners or things for people to read or places for folks to go to try to keep up besides continuing to listen to see you on the show?
Yes, yes. I would say, my biggest takeaway is now is your opportunity to build that trust early with your membership. You have a substantial opportunity at this moment in time to be able to differentiate yourself. And again, like you said, Doug, know your member and understand your member needs, and then put AI to work for you. Really get very, very laser focused on what this moment in time looks like for your credit union and why it matters. And if you can articulate that, you'll be on the right track. Also, again, we are partnering with the Council on AI Governance, and there's more to that coming soon. But they are a great resource to be able to put together a playbook on what AI governance looks like for your credit union.
Elizabeth Wadsworth, thank you for joining me today from Velera. Thank you for your insights on AI. And until next time, take care.